All right, now that we have our camera, and in this case it's our phone, set up for taking the images and the type of images that we want, let's go look at the documentation for the two pieces of software we'll be using. And there's a lot of overlap between the two as far as general rules and guidelines that you should use. Starting with, we'll talk about the resolution of your camera and the types of pictures you're taking. Both of them say use the highest resolution that your digital camera has. On the PhotoScan side, it says avoid ultra-wide angle and fisheye lenses, and your best choice is probably a fixed length 50mm focal length lens for your camera. Of course, we're just using our camera phone. We're keeping it simple. We're keeping it basic. And like I'll keep mentioning, you can go way down the rabbit hole as far as the very, very best equipment and scenarios that you can set up for photogrammetry. But I wanted to start out simple, and I want to start out realistic as well. I wanted to say, okay, I'm probably going to have my camera phone on me, and I'm probably not going to take 450 pictures of this object. So what kind of results could I get with me taking just a few minutes to get an object in, and what kind of quality can I expect from that? And like the settings we already set up, we're going to be using raw images, and we won't be converting them on the PhotoScan side, but we could convert them to TIFFs. On the reality capture side, it didn't recognize the DNG files that I had, at least not correctly. But we're also doing tests where we just drop the JPEGs in there, and it seemed to work pretty good. Your ISO values, your aperture values, and your shutter speeds. ISO should be the lowest possible. Aperture value should be high enough to result in sufficient focal depth so you get nice sharp images. Your shutter speed should be really quick so you're not getting any blurring. So basically, getting a lot of light into your camera and nice sharp photos to get as much detail as you can. Speaking of lighting, you're going to want a nice overcast day if you're shooting outside, or if you're shooting in a studio, you're going to want to have a way to diffuse your light so you're not capturing a bunch of shadows. You want nice ambient lighting. For example, we'll look at a couple different images here. So here's one that was shot in Hawaii, and it's got a bright daylit scene, and you can see it's casting shadows here. So it's going to capture the shadow information. You can remove this later using some techniques we'll talk about in later videos. But ideally, you're not capturing this information. You're not including this in your images. So if you go out when it's an overcast day or you're diffusing the light in a studio, you should get a much more ambient result. So here you don't even really see the shadows. You can kind of see shadows collecting where surfaces come together, and that's okay. But you're getting nice color information and not a lot of shadow information. Here you can see, again, it's an overcast day. And again, you are getting some ambient shadow casting in here. But you're not getting any really hot whites, you're not getting any really dark shadows, you're not getting any cast shadows baked into your object. It's like this one here. And this type of lighting situation will net you a much nicer result. On the PhotoScan side, it mentions shiny or highly reflective or transparent objects probably aren't going to capture very well. You can give it a shot, and algorithms are always getting better. But if you did want to shoot a shiny or translucent object, it's not a deal breaker. You can always powder it to get just the surface forms and go ahead and capture that. And then if you're just going to replace that anyway with, say, a car paint material later on in your workflow, it doesn't really matter if you're not capturing the albedo of the surface, especially when it comes to shiny surfaces that you can just recreate later on in the material of the object. Also on the PhotoScan side, it says go ahead and use the original image, don't crop or transform them, scale them down, or resize them, rotate them at all. And then on the capturing scenarios, as far as how you're taking your pictures, we have a facade here, and here's some nice little diagrams. So when you're shooting a flat surface, be it a wall or a ground, you don't want to stand in one place and then rotate your body. You're going to want to stand in one place, take a picture, step over a step, take another picture, step over a step, take another picture. And you want overlap in between the pictures so that it can find different points of reference to line up your images and recreate your 3D model using those reference points. As far as how many pictures you take, both of them say more is better. The more pictures you have, the better chance it's going to have enough views of your object to see and recalculate and reconstruct what's seen. If you don't have a picture of an area, it's just going to leave a hole, which isn't good. Also, you might have a poor quality picture that you didn't realize while you were out there, and then you get back home and you realize, oh, it was blurry or it's too dark or something happened with that image. And now, even though you had a picture there, still going to have a hole or a poorly reconstructed area of your mesh or a bad texture in some areas or a blurry texture just because something went wrong. So again, ideally, you're probably taking hundreds of pictures and you're taking duplicate or more pictures in one spot as you move around. But again, I wanted to be realistic with this one, so I just went around my object a couple times at different levels and called it a day. But again, if you really, really want to make sure you're capturing your object, the more the better. And you can always get rid of bad pictures later on, but you can't get good pictures later on unless you're going to go back out with the same light setup and recapture. If you're shooting interiors, you don't want to stand in the corners of the room and just turn around. You want to stand on the opposite wall and shoot the opposite wall that you're standing from and just move around the room like this. And if you're doing an isolated object shoot, which is what we're doing today, or it's what we're going to start with anyways, just like these ones, you don't want to stand in one place and take a shot. You want to stand in one place and then move and take another shot. You also don't want to take just 4 shots from the cardinal directions. You want to take multiple shots, just changing. It says over there on the reality capture side, do not change your viewpoint more than 30 degrees. So the smaller increments you make as you're going around your object, the more information it's going to have. So again, the more the better. Also on the reality capture side, it says use the coarse define rule. Start with taking a picture of the whole object. And on the photo scan side, it says also your object of interest should take up the maximum area. So get in close to the object so you can fill the frame with the object that you want to capture. You don't want it to be a small part of your scene. You want it to be a big part of your scene, especially if you're just shooting an isolated object. But getting back to the coarse define rule, you're going to want to start with the entire object in your frame and going around your object, but don't feel like you have to keep it within the object. You can get close. You start with taking pictures of the big object, and then you move around it, and then you go in and focus on the detail. So just slowly start moving in towards your object. And like it says on the photo scan side, you don't have to place a full object in the image frame in order to capture it. If some of the pieces are missing, that's fine, as long as your images are clear. And again, you're doing nice rotations with small increments around your object. It should be able to find those reference points and get you more detail, even though some pieces of the object might not be on the scene or on the screen. It'll use those higher resolution photos to dial in the detail on your geometry and your textures. However, on the reality capture side, it does say beware of jumping too close at once. Make it gradual. So start big, start capturing the whole object, and then slowly move into your object. And again, always moving and get more and more detail. And one last thing on the photo scan side, it does use the exif data on your camera, so that's the information that each picture you take with your camera that tells it what type of camera it is, what type of lens it's using, etc. Both programs will use that information to give you better results. So obviously, if possible, have that data stored on your images when you bring them in.